In this example, I'm going to go over how to set up a 3D scene with architectural elements that you've made in Photoshop. So for example, this scene has a building with a rendering that has the background transparent, as well as the background transparent in a skyline image and a tree. And so here we're going to combine them all together. And so what this can kind of look like is, moving through and seeing these other elements happen here. And so here we have the camera really feeling like it's moving through a particular scene. And we're using 3D layers to help set this up and position a camera inside of it. So we're going to set it up in 3D space first and then insert the camera. So I'm going to start out by just deleting out everything here. And then I need to unlock this layer. Save this as a separate file. And what I'm going to do is just start from scratch, where I create a new composition, 1920 by 1080. And I'm going to go back to one view, so that way I can just set up my scene. And I'm going to bring in a series of images. So here, let's bring in the building. And let's stretch this out. So we're going to get it to be about this size. And then bring in the skyline behind it. And then I'm going to make a solid layer just behind everything. So new, so right click, new, solid, and let's just do something orangey. Say okay, and place it behind everything. And when you do a 3D layer, we can position these in space, and it's really helpful to be in two views. So with one view, I'm going to go to two views horizontal, and on this one, it's not going to set it up yet to be able to see it from the top, although I can say from the top, but it's not going to show me any difference because I haven't made any of the layers 3D. So to do that, I'm going to click on the element here for 3D, and all of a sudden now we're seeing it in 3D. So when I click back here, let's just make sure this is set to the active camera. This one is set to the top, and I change it by clicking in each of these. And so now let's also activate the Chicago to be in 3D. And right now they're just stacked right on top of each other. But when I select the building, I can push it forward in space, or maybe I want it to start out where it was, just at the very center. And let's push Chicago back a little bit in terms of space. And I might even increase this as well. So I can press S. Let's increase the size. And the more higher resolution images you have, the better. But let's see, I'm going to go back to here and just push it back in space. So now, if we look at this, we can see that, there's technically a bunch of space between these two elements. So if I come in with a tree, put it between the two layers, what I can then do is turn it 3D. And if I move it in front, it's going to get really close. And if I move it between them, you'll see that now it's actually between my two layers. And if I push it forward in Z space, it'll come in front. And as soon as I bring it in front, we'll see it in front of that image here. So this is our building. I can push it behind. Oop. And if I duplicate it, let's do a couple trees. Command D to duplicate. So I'm just making a group of trees. Let's push this one back over a little bit. It's really helpful, rather than grabbing the middle part of this and really trying to move it all around, it's helpful just to grab on the outside arrow points. I'm then going to group these all together, and I could either parent them together, or if I want them to all stay together, what I can do is right click and go to pre-compose, and this is going to be trees. And now those are all one solid image. Let's turn it to a 3D layer. And now I'll have the ability to push it back. And I want to push it down, so I can come here and push it down between my two layers. So now it really feels like it's behind those elements there. So then I need to create a camera to really move through my scene. So what I can do is I can right click, go to in the timeline here, right click, new, and camera. And I'm going to start off with a one node camera, just so it's a basic camera. And inside our videos, our list of videos, there's a really great one from Motion Science on cameras, and I highly recommend that for getting a little bit more in-depth view into how cameras work in After Effects. I'm going to set up a camera, and it will start out with the viewpoint starting at 0, and now our active view is tied to that particular view. So you'll see that when I look at it from the side over here, and if I rotate it, let's zoom in over here. If I rotate it around, let's go to my camera here. Whoa, zoom back out. It's back where it was. I undid that. If I move it over and then press R for rotation, then it's a little bit easier to adjust the rotations. And you can see how all of these are really positioned in space. So if I move my camera to the side and I rotate even more, right, you can see how all of those are technically positioned in space. So it's almost like creating the idea of, like theater sets or, elements positioned in space. And you can add animation to these, but I'm just going to have the camera moving through it. Maybe we'll animate the trees. So I need to start out with it a little bit closer. So about here, and let's zoom out so we're seeing our full scene. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer, and I can use the position here. So I want it to come down a little bit. That's pretty good. And what I could do is, if I wanted to like pan across, I can separate this out into different sort of moments. So what I could do is hit the position keyframe, jump to 4 seconds, and then have it really like pan up, or I could have it pan over. So as I'm panning over, maybe I just want it to slightly start here or end there. And this one, maybe I want it to go back over a little bit this way. So now we're getting this sort of movement going across, and it's going to take a second to render. It's just, I have OBS open recording this, so it takes a little bit more rendering time. So let's see. So I'm going to stop it there, and we'll see this moving across. It's going at half the resolution. So now it really feels like, because those elements are farther in the distance, it actually feels like they're going to move at a slightly different speed. Now, if I wanted my camera movement to then zoom in and go sort of like over, what I could do is hold this keyframe here till like about 6 seconds. So it's going to move forward, start or slide to the side, then jump and stay. And now I can reset it. So now it's going to move forward. And here's where I can now come forward in space like that. And it's helpful to have higher sort of resolution with these as you're working, but if you're exporting from Rhino or Photoshop, then you'll get it working well. So let's see, I'm going to drop it down a quarter just so we can have this sort of render a little bit faster. So what's nice is, you're not limited to, if we play this back, you're not limited to just having images in the scene. You can also think about, okay, maybe I want text to pop up at certain points. So maybe as it gets to this point here, it holds for a second. So I'm going to go back, click the keyframe here, and then I jump forward, and maybe I want it to like go up and over, but as it's moving around these trees, like we see some text pop up. So let's zoom out. Let's create some text. So I'm going to go text. This is going to be welcome. And notice we don't see anything yet. Takes a second. So let's go to a black font or heavyweight font. And here's where I have to turn it to a 3D layer. And let's push it back in space. Go back to my arrow tool, push it back in space. And then I'm going to position this over, and maybe I want it to come down. So maybe this pops up at a certain point. So it actually pops up from behind the tree, right? So let's start here, and then I'm gonna keyframe this position so it starts out down. So let's go to the Y, move it down, and then as we're moving through it, it'll come up. then let's move the camera forward as well. So we can do a couple movements. We can have it swing over and swing through. Whoop. And swing through this here. And so now, and if we want the camera to rotate, we can come back and we can hit R for rotation. And this we want a, not an X rotation, but a Y rotation to pan it over. So as we're doing this, I'm gonna hit Y, hit U to see my keyframes again, and then move forward, and let's go for like just sort of like a sweep going across. And this is where maybe you want, you know, more separation with Chicago. So maybe you want it to be separated back a little bit. So that's where you can take this and move it a little bit farther back if you need to. It's really up to you how you would like to make this work. So now we're gonna have this pan through. And I'm doing this at quarter, which is why it's a little bit grainy. There you go. So you got a lot of options in terms of how you'd like to make this work. Maybe the text should just be a little bit smaller there. So let's double click on the T, and then I can always shrink down the text. So now it'll pop up. Now you can read the whole thing. So say you have lots of elements you want to move through. This would be one way of really navigating through it without having to use a 3D modeling program where you're using flat images to really rotate and move through a scene.